Hello and welcome to this bonus episode of Reading the Bible is Easy-ish. I'm Harrison Litzel. This is Hogan Brock. We are here at a time that we're not normally a part of your podcast feed, but we hope you are as excited to see us as we are excited to be here. For this bonus episode, we're just going to do things a little bit differently. We like the format that we have going on Mondays, but there was just a few more things that we wanted to discuss this week. Primarily, I wanted to turn our attention a little bit more to Hogan and ask him some of the questions that he has been asking the guests so far and hear his answers. So Hogan, how are you feeling about this first bonus episode?
Incredibly nervous, really incredibly nervous. I read some of these, some of the questions that you had kind of posed, and there are a couple that I don't know, I think that I'm still uncomfortable giving my answer to. Because I think it'll make some people that I love uncomfortable. And so I'm a little nervous about that, but I'm excited to share and excited to kind of explore it with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I made you a little nervous. I will say that I thought about withholding all the questions and not giving you any hint of what was to come, but I thought we might get a little bit more information with a little bit of preparation. Even though that goes against the very fundamental idea of this podcast.
It also goes against, like, knowing me in college, that also goes against like the fundamentals of who I am to really prepare. That's so you can count on relatively minimal preparation for the pod. I did think about it.
All right. Sounds good. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The first question will start off a little bit easy, but Hogan, tell us just about your physical Bible. When you pick up a Bible or when you go to read the Bible, what does that Bible look like? What version is it? How long have you had it? What is it?
Yeah, so I for my entire life, I've never been able to keep a Bible for more than about a year, and that's not because I wear it out or use it all that much. It's just I lose them. I always have. So if someone's listening to this podcast and they have my like thin line black NRSV, I really loved that Bible, and I think I lost it at Tabernacle Baptist Church. So anybody there finds my Bible, let me know. But the thing about this, I have a Bible at each place that I kind of engage where I read the Bible. So I'm at my desk at home right now, and I have a Bible on a shelf back here that I use here. And it is just a white NRSV study Bible that we actually got in college. Yeah, and I use the NRSV just about anywhere I am. If I'm at church, I have a different Bible there it's just a pew Bible. And I started using that because we are at my congregation still using Zoom for our worship. And so I find it just a little connection to the physical space when I'm reading online to just show the pew Bible that people would be used to seeing. So I use that there. And then at any given time, you can count that Bible Gateway is open on my computer. And most of the time, when I'm doing something for the podcast, when I'm preparing something for worship on Sunday morning, that's the main way that I'm going to engage the text is online through Bible Gateway. I find it very helpful to be able to flip between translations. I often, especially in the last couple of months, have been going to the Message more regularly just to hear something that sometimes is a little easier to digest for me. Sometimes it's actually a little more complicated, I feel like, when it's simplified that way. But yeah, those are the main ways that I kind of engage the Bible in the physical ways that I engage the Bible. I don't look at the Bible on my phone very often unless it's kind of a last resort. I don't have an app with the Bible on my phone. I know that's kind of a common thing for people. But yeah, for the most part, it's these hardback, not super usable Bibles that I have at home and at work.
Yeah, I have actually. Take this as symbolically as you want, but my laptop is currently sitting on that NRSV study Bible that you were just mentioning. That's right under my laptop right now, and so it is foundational to this podcast, structural, if you will. So if now that we've got the kind of physical description out of the way, let's go in a little bit of a different direction. And if you were describing the Bible to someone who had never encountered Christianity before, how would you define it, or how would you describe it? When you think about what the Bible is, what is your elevator pitch, your elevator explanation of what is the Bible?
Yeah, so this is a challenging question. This is something that's changed for me a lot over the years. I think I like to think about the Bible as a collection of stories. And I think about it that way because stories mean a lot to me. Not just religious stories necessarily, but fictional stories, nonfiction stories. I connect deeply to storytelling. And so for me, I think my elevator pitch for the Bible, for someone who has not encountered it before, is that it's a collection of stories um, with some amount of shared meaning that in some way guide or inform what God has been doing in the world. Particularly in the life of like specific communities, right? Like when we look at the Old Testament, that follows a very specific um, Jewish community, and then in the New Testament, we shift from there. But yeah, it's a collection of stories that we can draw shared meaning from that follow specific acts of God through time. And I think that's how I think about the Bible.
So the reason I thought of that question was I'm actually writing VBS curriculum right now, and was trying to kind of put together that definition for children for ages 3 through 11, and that's when I kind of started thinking about that. So adapting that question a little bit, is there anything you would change for that question? That is my dog barking in the background, which means there's either a person at the front door or a leaf flowing down the street. So apologies about that. But is there anything you would change about your definition for that audience of 3 to 11 years old? Is there anything you would change if you were speaking specifically to children?
Yeah, I don't know. I would use less words, I guess. That maybe is my main takeaway. I think that in my definition, what's lacking, I think, is there is something sacred or holy to me about the text. And I think I mean that differently than I might have maybe 8 or 10 years ago. It's not sacred or holy in that like it's untouchable or unquestionable, but it's sacred or holy in the value that it carries to large communities. And I do believe that that God uses the text. And so maybe if I adapted that, it's for kids, like maybe I'd say it's part of God's story in the world,
Yeah.
and make it that simple. I'm curious though, writing curriculum, have you arrived at a definition, or are there things you're thinking about?
I'm still working on it. For one of the things that I try to do is whenever we talk about things like the Bible or a book of the Bible with children, is just kind of give a little bit of explanation to what it is. So if we're talking about the book of Matthew, I'll say like the book of Matthew is a book in the New Testament that tells us about the story of Jesus, and just give a little bit of that. And so in this curriculum, the first time that I'm talking about the Bible, I just wanted to give a little bit of that. What is this? Why does this book matter? And I arrived at a lot of the same kind of things you're talking about. Of it's a collection of stories. It is an account of the way God interacted with a specific community of people, and it is a book that has been shared and relied upon and valued by people for thousands of years. And I think that for me, that's a big part of it too. Is not just what the book is, but the fact that it has been a guide for so many people for so long, and has been valued by so many people for so long. I think that's a part of its power as well. And so those are kind of a few of the pieces that I try to incorporate into those definitions. And it's just adapting it for children and making sure it's something that they can understand, and at least grasp a little bit of it, if not the whole idea of what it is. So
That's interesting. I having been a youth minister for a bit, there's growing up in a more conservative congregation where the Bible, there's like a very high view of the Bible. And then being in a congregation that I think for a lot of people, and this is obviously a generalization, but for a lot of people in their kind of deconstruction of maybe some things that they grew up with, have a very low view of the Bible. And so it was interesting to interact with their children who, their relationship to the Bible was just very complicated because I think there was this foundation that a lot of those adults maybe had of a very high view of the Bible that they held on to pieces of. But that sort of past didn't necessarily translate to the way that they taught their kids or the way that their kids related to the Bible. So it's interesting the ways that the way that we talk about the Bible or faith in general with our kids. We can't assume that they're carrying the same like background knowledge that we carry. And so that's something that I think about a lot working with teenagers, especially.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's interesting. All right. So Hogan, how do you read the Bible? We talked about where your Bibles are and what they look like, but when you read, is it an academic venture? Is it a devotional thing? Do you read at random? Do you know, open to a random page and that's your reading, or do you go in a specific order, a specific plan? What does that look like for you?
So most of my actual like Bible reading happens either with the Revised Common Lectionary, which is what we follow on our Monday episodes of the podcast. And so I usually every week I read the 4 texts that the Revised Common Lectionary gives, and I read those. It's this blend of devotionally and not quite academically, but in preparation for some sort of Sunday worship event, right? So I'm reading the text with an eye towards, okay, I'm going to write some sort of call to worship that's got to connect to this. And so I'm thinking about different themes and stuff that I can tease out. The way that I do engage the Bible devotionally, though, isn't through reading. I use a website and an app called Pray As You Go. That is every day there's a posting, and I'm trying to remember who publishes that. I think it maybe is I'm not even gonna guess. All of them have British accents, so it's someone in the UK. They read a text, usually from the Book of Common Prayer, and then there's some sort of kind of reflection questions that are asked, and it takes 10 to 15 minutes. And so that's the primary way that I engage the Bible on a daily basis, other than doing it for work and engaging it that way. And as a seminary student, I engage the Bible academically from time to time. This semester has been different because I'm taking just one course, and so and that's not a biblical studies course, but in my normal kind of rhythm of life as a student, yeah, I engage the Bible academically.
Yeah. So I feel like you answered this a little bit, so we'll kind of keep going with it. But what other tools do you use regularly when you read the Bible?
Yeah, so I use one of the reasons I use Bible Gateway as my way to engage the Bible is as a tool. It has a lot of things that I use regularly. I'm interested in phrases and words that are used repeatedly in text, and that's something I can on Bible Gateway. You can just search. I know to show you every instance that word or phrase occurs, and then I use Pray As You Go devotionally. It's helpful for me to have something it's backed with music. It's very low kind of barrier to entry. I'm someone, not surprisingly, I wanted to make a podcast. I engage with podcasts pretty constantly in my life. If I'm not doing something else, you can bet that I'm listening to something. And so audio is something that I connect to very easily. And so that medium works for me as a way to just kind of set the tone, I guess, for my day. It's a meditation kind of practice for me. I don't think if there are any other tools. If I'm preaching, I do like, and I mentioned this, I think, on a very early episode of the podcast. It's Text This Week. I think the website is actually just textweek.com.
Yeah.
But it does an interesting, the way it's set up is interesting. It connects the text for that week with podcasts with essays that have been run on, other sermons, occasionally some commentary, some different stuff. But yeah, those are the primary tools that I use. I talk to a lot of people too. If I'm really engaging with a text, Holly, the senior pastor at 7th Street, we talk every week about the text for quite a long time, because my brain connects to things differently than other people's brains do. And so I think that's maybe the richest tool, as cheesy as that sounds, for engaging a text, is to talk to other people and see where
definitely.
they can make connections.
Yeah. So again, I feel like this will kind of build off of what you're talking about so far, but why do you read the Bible? What role does it play in your faith, in your life? Why does it continue to be a part of your meditative practices, your weekly habits? Why do you read the Bible?
Yeah, that changes from season to season for me. So there've definitely been points in my life where I don't know why I'm reading the Bible, or in some of those times, right, I'm just reading the Bible a lot less. And so and in those times of my life, I would say it hasn't been very meaningful when I have. It's been difficult to connect with. In this season of my life, the theme of story again is really important to me, and so I see my practice as Christian as being connected to the story of God that we get in the Bible. And so as a way of remembering history, of remembering the tradition that I'm rooted in. That's part of why I engage the Bible, is to remind myself kind of where I'm sitting or where I'm standing. And then devotionally, I mean, I don't take many opportunities to slow down enough. And the Bible is an interesting way, reading something that is not written in modern language, even if it's translated into modern language. When I read the Bible, I have to slow down to understand the way that sentences are put together, or to understand what is trying to be communicated. And so for me, it functions again kind of as a meditative practice, an opportunity to kind of pause and breathe and notice in ways that I don't when I engage other things. Yeah, I think that's maybe the most important thing to me about reading the Bible right now. Is just the rhythm of it, and the way that it kind of forces me to engage differently.
Yeah, I like what you said about slowing down. It's something I've noticed about myself is I enjoy reading. I read a lot, and the pace at which I read the Bible is so much slower than I read anything else, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. It's slower, and I used to be frustrated by that, but I think I have learned that it's because the way that I was trained, the way that I read the Bible is more deliberate. It is, I can catch on to one word in the Bible and hyper focus on that. Whereas when I'm reading fiction or something else, it's not about the word or even the sentence. Sometimes it's the chapter as a whole that I kind of revisit and think about. But with the Bible, it is so often word by word that I'm thinking about and curious about and wondering about. And it's a different pace. And I think some of that is the syntax and the sentence structure from translations and from millennia of difference in time. And some of it is just the way that we view the Bible and how much weight and importance we can give to any little bit of it. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, one more thing on that. There's growing up, I always wanted to, if you go to Sunday school, the Sunday school teacher would ask you to read the Bible out loud. And that was always a tenuous thing, because, you don't want to mess up reading the Bible. So it was always a goal for me growing up to be able to read it well and read it quickly, out loud especially. And so at Eastern Mennonite in seminary, I had a professor, Dorothy Jean Weaver, who I took a class with on the book of John, and it was her practice to read it as slow as you can out loud. And so at the beginning of each class period, we'd read one chapter of John, and it might take 10 minutes, right? Like, we're going to be really slow and deliberate in the way we do that. And so that practice kind of became formational for me, and changed the way that I approach the Bible.
Yeah, I like that. All right, so what passages of the Bible do you revisit? Where do you find yourself drawn to, because they're life-giving, or because you found them to be important to your faith, or because you're just kind of drawn to them? Where do you find yourself going?
Yeah, passages that I go back to often. I go back to Ruth, the book of Ruth, quite a lot. There's something, I'm not sure why, but there's something incredibly powerful to me about Ruth is an anomaly in the Bible, right? Like, God is not mentioned. And so there's I guess an academic fascination with the book of Ruth in some ways, but there's something in the connection, that devotion that Ruth gives to Naomi that's really powerful to me, and it's something that I think about quite often. I'd say the other thing that I go back to is there are a variety of stories in the Gospel of John, but I go back to the temple sequence in John, which happens a lot earlier in John than it does in other Gospels. And so I go back to that sequence a lot, just to remind I can get teased into thinking that Jesus is kind of this meek and mild person, and that's I think where I would rather be, quiet and passive and on the side and full of grace. But I'm married to someone who can be a good bit more fiery than me, particularly when it comes to issues of justice. And so going back to that scene where Jesus is in the temple and overturning tables and doing something that is violent. There's violent action that's taking place there, and remembering that is also part of my faith. That's also part of my faith tradition, and who I'm connecting to as a Christian, someone who who had that kind of fire for justice. Yeah, so those are the two big ones that I come back to consistently.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The one passage of Ruth, it seems like you find interest and curiosity there, as well as some comfort in that relationship of the characters there. And then having a passage like that passage in John, where it's like this, I need to be constantly reminded of this Jesus, of who Jesus is in this passage, in order to continue to draw me towards that. I think it's good to have those passages as well that continue to pull and to push you into a more full understanding of who Jesus is. So I appreciate you sharing that. All right, so the last question that I have scripted here is, what passages do you find yourself avoiding for whatever reasons? Either you find them boring, or you find them difficult to your faith or your understanding of who God is. Where do you not try to go in the Bible?
Yeah, I mean, I dodge, I think, like a lot of people, the kind of instruction texts in Leviticus particularly, or in Numbers. So there's some things that there I find boring, but what I actively avoid engaging with, I think, more with other people than I do on my own reading maybe, but is anything written by Paul. And I just think part of this is influenced by Christine Jones, who was a professor we had at Carson Newman. Don't want to throw her under the bus, but she I think she would say she has a difficult relationship with Paul. Does engage him well, I think, but Paul says some complicated things, and I wrestle with the contradictions that I see in Paul, the instructions that he's giving as he's trying to figure out how to instruct these communities that are forming for the first time. And I certainly struggle with some of the things that are wielded to harm people that Paul says. Different things about the places of women in society or in church, and their relationship with men. Like that stuff is tough for me to engage with. Yeah, I think like a lot of things in my life, it's a place where I see potential conflict, and so it's a place that I tend to try not to go.
Yeah. So after answering all these questions and kind of going through this, is there anything that, after you've said it, is there anything that you want to kind of go back and add or change from what you've said so far today, or you comfortable with everything that's been said?
There's a joke in my house that I can say things really well once and then I can't recall what I said. So yeah, I'm not sure that I even remember well enough to go back and correct myself.
Yeah, we'll take that.
Yeah. I think the one thing that I would add, though, is the way that I connect to the Bible and relate to the Bible is always changing. I began my Christian kind of journey at a place where I value the Bible incredibly highly. I moved through a place where I really did not value the Bible much at all. And then I'm coming to a place where I'm valuing it again really highly, but for different reasons. Yeah, so I'm excited about my relationship to the Bible now. And I'm fascinated by what that journey kind of looks like through life, the different ways we connect and relate and change through that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, thank you for sharing all those things with us. Like I said, I didn't want you to be able to put all these questions to the guests each week and you not have to go through it yourself. After all, you're the one who started the podcast, so I feel like you should have to share a little bit as well. And thank you to everyone for joining us for this bonus episode of Reading the Bible is Easy-ish. I think it's fair to say that we will do these occasionally. We won't make any more promises than that, but you'll find them in your feed every once in a while. And we hope you will join us in that. We will see you again on Monday as we return to our regular format with our 5-minute timers and our surprising biblical text. So thanks for joining us. Make sure to like, subscribe, tell your friends, your family, everybody you know to check it out. So see you next time.